So welcome, bonjour, good afternoon, good morning. It's still morning. Sorry. We are so excited to be with you all today for our session on intersectional approaches to fostering well-being and care in the first generation community. My name is Kelly Collins. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a first generation steering committee member, and I will serve as our room host today for this breakout session. As a reminder, we are recording this session, and the recording will be posted on the First Gen Institute website following the conclusion of our conference. Please note that if you have any questions during today's session or technology concerns, you can chat with me directly, and I'm happy to provide support. I also want to provide a little context on our session. Our topic, as I mentioned, is how we can collectively foster well-being and care in our first generation community. And to offer some context on this session, one of the things we started imagining together as a committee were the ways that we enact care practices both for ourselves and each other. So myself and my wonderful colleague and co-facilitator Consuelo Gutierrez-Crosby, and also want to name Stephen Cisneros, who is also a member of our committee, is unable to be here today, but he was part of our imagining together around a session on well-being and care for the first gen community. When we were thinking together about this topic, we wanted to think about ourselves, our stories, as data. And as I mentioned in our previous session, that's one of the ways I think that we can give ourselves the recognition of these important knowledge bodies, our stories and experiences, as legitimate, right? As really important ways that we understand how to be in the collective and how to be in a care space together. So I'm really excited to hear the stories of our panelists and also your own questions. Want to note that we will try to leave some time at the end for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to jot those down and we will have some space towards the end of our session. So with that, it is my very deep pleasure and honor to introduce my fellow steering committee member who will serve as our moderator today. So take it away, Consuelo Gutierrez-Crosby.
Thanks, Kelly, and hello, everybody. I hope that you have enjoyed the First Gen Institute thus far. We had a wonderful keynote presentation this morning, and hope that got you all thinking about some critical ways in which we understand well-being, or how that relates to student well-being. And then also, I hope that you're able to take away from your first session and thinking about the context of first gen students and how all of these things intersect and affect student well-being. So as we know, these are not like individual, even though they're individual sessions, they all somehow connect and are intersectional. And so I hope that you're able to take that learning and apply it as you move forward. My name is Consuelo Gutierrez-Crosby, she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director for TRIO and President's Emerging Scholars Coordinator in College of Education and Human Development. And I have the privilege of working with our panelists and introducing them and moderating the panel today. I am a first-gen college student, originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, so shout out. I was really excited to have some New Mexico representation at the First-Gen Institute this morning. I came here as a first-gen college student, and many of the things that we've been talking about have impacted my understanding of higher education, and I feel like I'm in a great space to be able to work with students in the context of their overall academic journey. And so today, what we'd like to do is introduce our panelists briefly. I'm going to just say who we have today with us, and then they're going to get a chance to share a little bit more about who they are. So we have Jessica Cameron, who's our Assistant Director for the President's Emerging Scholars Program. Carly Duran Marrero, who is a Graduate Assistant with President's Emerging Scholars Program. Savari Manvikar, who is a Graduate Faculty in the Center for Spirituality and Healing. Kelly McPhail, Academic Technologist in the Center for Spirituality and Healing. And last but not least, but Nina Hernandez Betan, who is our Diversity Liaison counselor in student counseling services. And so as the panelists introduce themselves, we've asked them to think a little bit about their identities. They're also going to be sharing a little bit about some ways that they take care of themselves, and thinking about their identities, how that's influenced the ways in which they work with first-gen students. And so they'll be sharing that as way of their introductions. And so we will go ahead and start with Carly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Consuelo, for the amazing introduction. And thank you, Kelly, for hosting this space. My name is Carly Dran Marrero. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm not tied to either. Either is fine. As was mentioned, I'm the graduate assistant for President's Emerging Scholars Program. And I'm also the graduate advisor for MK LLC. And I specifically work with Casa Sol students. And so as it relates to my identities and the ways in which I work with first-gen students, I'm first-gen myself. I graduated from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in December of 2020, so I didn't get to walk or anything like that. I'm a COVID grad. I also started my master's of higher ed, and I'm in my second year. Hopefully we'll finish in the spring. And so I am also an alum of PES, and now full circle, I get to work in the office once more. As it relates to how I work with students, as it relates to my identities, I'm a queer person, I'm a brown person, I'm femme, I'm a caretaker, I'm very collectivist. It's important for me to be in community. And so as it relates to like being first gen and also having grown into, I think, my professional self, PES was really foundational in that, right? In affirming each aspect of my identity. I got to serve as a peer mentor, and that was of great privilege as well. And then in terms of wellness, I find that I'm reading all the time because I'm a graduate student. And so if I can read things that fill my cup, that feels good. So I highlight here the Sacred Heart, and I have my LLC students read that as well as we attempt to build community in the first couple of weeks of them attending, and then also the Beloved Community, which I actually learned from the leadership minor, and bell hooks always, right? And so having really intentional dialogue about how do we hold space for those that don't serve us all the time, right? How do we hold space for when harm is done, and being in higher ed, right? Being in student affairs, some of the crises that we work with, but then also the politics that we work with. I think that engaging students in early stages, specifically first-gen students, specifically students of marginalized identities, framing that work early on is instrumental to their wellness as well as their professional development. So yeah, thank you so much for this space, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Panelists, as when the slide comes up, go ahead and just jump right in.
Okay, great. Here's my cue. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Nina Hernandez-Baitan. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as the Diversity Liaison Counselor at Student Counseling Services. It's an honor to be here with you all today and looking forward to our conversation. So I am a graduate from the U. I graduated with my master's in social work, and I previously did my education and undergrad at Bethel University. I've worked primarily in the Latinx community. I'm not a first-gen student myself. My dad is a college professor, so I've grown up around higher education my whole life, and really am passionate about serving students in this way. I think the question of how do my identities impact the ways that I show up and support students. I am a mixed kiddo. I find myself at a lot of like intersections of marginalized and privileged identities. And so part of what has been really meaningful for me in my time here at the U in the last 5 years has been being able to be in intentional community with people who are holding similar identities where we can have conversations. And so I'm a co-facilitator for a mixed multiracial group. I've worked and supported folks in queer identities, cis identities, and recently started co-facilitating a sex ed class with a queer and trans lens. And it's been really enjoyable to be able to have to be able to show up fully as who I am and my identities in the workplace. I think that as a social worker, as a therapist, oftentimes we get messaging around you have to be like this very professional, unbiased, like blank slate of a person. And that's just like not who I am. And so I did that for like a year and I was like, oh no, this is horrible. Like, I don't like this. It was very draining. And so I feel really grateful to mentors along the way who have been able to support me in showing up really just like who I am, and I get to be like this in sessions individually with students, in group and partnership with other people. And so I think that creating community, really working deeply in collaboration with other folks has been a huge part of what's been really meaningful, the way that I want to approach the work. On some of my cute little self-care resources. So I'm like 5-6 years post-grad, but I'm still really hesitant to like look at articles anymore. Like I just can't read anymore. Like it was so much reading. Really. I feel you. Like I love the pleasure reading. So I actually do a lot of TikTok. I love a good audio message with a friend while I'm driving. I'm a parent, and so I just don't have a lot of time. So I do a lot of that to kind of capitalize on time. I'm a danzante, so I'm a part of an Indigenous Mexican community here locally, and I'm able to participate in ceremonies and do ancestral dance and practices. That brings me lots of joy. And then if y'all don't know about them and you're interested in ice cream or paletas in this frigid weather, recommend to check out La Michoacana Purepecha on the east side of St. Paul. There's a Minneapolis location, it's fine, but the St. Paulian, like that one's better. So just think about that as you make your choice. But great to be here with you all. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good morning, everyone, and happy pre-Friday. My name is Jessica. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the assistant director with the ES Central team. I'm really excited to be with you all here. So I am a CEHD alum from my master's program, Cyclone at heart, sorry, from my undergrad. And I am a certified facilitator for mental health first aid. So parts of my identities I did include on the slide, but I didn't include that feel important to bring up today is I'm someone who lives with generalized anxiety. I'm a creator. I am a storyteller, and I'm passionate about helping people understand how systems impact them. I'm actually a sociologist undergrad, so I very identify socially with social impact and social structures. And so the question is, how do my identity help or inform the way that I work with students? And I think it's definitely to have students understand the consequences, unfortunately, of what their social identities mean. As someone who's first gen and went to college out of state, struggle was a part of my life, as it's a part of many, and it was very humbling and reassuring to understand that that wasn't always a response to something that I did, although that's sometimes disheartening to name. It's a reality, and I think that helping students understand the system and how that impacts them is really helpful. And so I teach a training, or I offer a training called the Mental Health First Aid Program, where it's a 6-hour training, and students and staff can go through and learn about the reality of how mental health is embedded in our life, and how it shows up and manifests as we navigate different spaces. So I think that definitely informs how I work with students.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly MacPhail. You might see in the Zoom chat that I have identified myself as Kelly Wakely MacPhail. I thought that was relevant today, being as though as Kelly Wakely, that is how I earned my bachelor's degree from CLA and my master's from CEHD. So yeah, I think there's just kind of a lot of pieces with being a first gen college student and, being an alum of this institution at the undergraduate and graduate level. being a transfer student in my undergrad, coming into working at the university after having been an educator in the high school setting, for 12 years prior to that, and working with other students primarily who would be going on to becoming first-gen students themselves. And even just helping students, I think Dr. Montoya might actually still be in the session today talking about how he was a first-gen high school student. That was, definitely the case with a lot of my students that I worked with in the high school setting, that they would have been the first high school graduates of their family as well. So even at that point in my career, it was about, helping students just navigate the institution, curating resources, just doing things that, serve to reduce cognitive load and overwhelm in that navigating, but also, creating connection, being a transfer student, coming in, just really, it's been an incredible experience today to be part of this First Gen Institute, and just actually having a sense of being in community with other people whose stories resonate with my own. Just, having that connection and community, it just serves so much. So that's like the approach that I'm bringing in. Like, I don't work directly with students. I support faculty in my role as Director of Learning Resources at the Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing. So it's just trying to bring things together and work collaboratively to support student well-being moving forward. And as far as my own personal self-care, I'm definitely in a point in my life where I've got to get up and get it in before the rest of my family wakes up. So I take advantage of a lot of like personal, like on-demand, meditation, yoga, exercise, nutrition, thinking about self-care in that really like literal sense. But beyond that, it's, making sure that I'm just present for the things that truly matter in my life. I don't know if there's really a resource for that per se, but something that we enjoy doing as a family is spending time outside in nature, enjoying the benefits of that for well-being. And we're avid hikers. We frequent the Minnesota-Wisconsin State Park System, as well as all kinds of other local places. And a link that I shared on my slide is for a website or an app called Roots Rated, where you can look up and plan a lot of awesome hikes. And it's a really fantastic resource if you love being outside, but you're not sure where to go. And that's all I have for now.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for lovely conversation today. And I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation with all of you. I'm Asavari Manvikar, and I pronounce myself as she or her. And I'm a first generation immigrant, not the first generation student, but definitely this is like very exciting. And also this can be very overwhelming when you are a parent of somebody who is going to be a first generation student in a new country or a different country. And both of my daughters, they are actually in the college, and I was not about, I was not sure like what to expect. And this is like a really journey for them as well as for me. So how can you really bring, wellness into teaching as well as in supporting your kids, as well as in supporting your students? I feel everything really starts from like self-love and self-care, because if you are rooted and if you really know who you are and what are your values, and if you are open to, multiple opportunities, it really brings, so many things forward to you. So I'm a big advocate of Ayurveda and yoga in order to taking the self-care, and that is what I teach as well as I practice for myself for the wellness. And it's all about looking at the physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual well-being. How can you do that? Typically, Ayurveda talks about 3 different pillars of health. And that's what I always try to bring in my classes, and I talk to, all my students. What can they do for themselves, right, on a day-to-day basis? Because this is moment-to-moment awareness. This is about, really learning about who you are and how you feel and connecting to yourself. So there are three different things that are really very important for the self-care and wellness. One is diet, what you like, who are what you eat. So it's really important to look at what is on your plate, making sure that it is, well cooked and like organic, good quality food. Second thing is about really lifestyle, like how we are living, whether we feel supported, whether we are living in the community, and whether we are waking up early in the morning and what time we go to bed. So all of those things which are really important for the self-care. And the third aspect is, like it is related to the sleep, because most of the times when you are a student, there is so much to look at as supposed to, related to the deadlines. And there is so much stress I see for the students as well as for my kids related to to meet those deadlines. They have to really stay up very late at night, and then they suffer the next day. And sometimes even it is a vicious cycle. So making sure that you go to bed around the right time and having really good routine for every day helps a lot actually for the self-care and also for the emotional well-being. There are lots of books which are really very, very useful for the self-care. And one of the books I love to read, and I also love to, talk about, is Perfect Health by Dr. Deepak Chopra. I'm just holding this book here. It is very easy to connect to, and it talks about different personalities, because this is all about who you are as a different person or as an individual, because this is a personalized, healing approach and taking care of yourself. Not, like we cannot build one thing for everybody. You have to really realize who you are and how you are a part of this community, this group, and what you can bring forward to and what you can do for yourself as a, for self-healing. So that is one of the really wonderful books. If you are able to, get in touch with that. There is another book, which is Ayurveda, The Science of Self-Healing. So this talks about like different self-healing, healing kind of modalities and things that we can do. And due to the different stresses in the life, many times, we see people having emotional disturbances as well as the hormonal disturbances. So there is another book I feel is really very, very useful, which talks about different modalities, and that is about the balance your hormone, balance your life. There are definitely lots of wonderful self-care techniques and tools. If you can go to the Bakan Center, that is a lovely place to be at. And I'm really glad to be, a part of this center for last 12 years. I teach CSPH 5343 Ayurvedic medicine course, and that's how I try to connect to the students directly. And it is always nice to hear their stories, where they are coming from and how I can support them in their own healing as well as a part of the class.
Thank you all. This is great. And so I'm going to weave in together kind of a little bit about what I heard from the panelists as they talked about their introductions. One of the things that I heard resonate actually in all of what you were saying as you were thinking about like your introductions and what's important about well-being and kind of hitting on a little bit of a definition for well-being, all of you talked about community and community being a part of well-being. And I think when we think about well-being, sometimes we just think about the physical, maybe the mental or the emotional, but like I appreciate that all of you are bringing in kind of a more holistic look at well-being. I also appreciated that Asavari, you talked a little bit about the personalization of well-being. And that it doesn't, and I think we saw this in the introductions from the slides that all of the panelists put together, is that we asked them all to think about like, what are ways that they take care of themselves, right? What are their preferred ways of well-being, self-care? And we saw a variety of things, right? From TikTok, lighthearted, like just like a way to kind of escape and laugh, to getting out in nature. And so that it varies from each of us in our approach to well-being. And I think that that's really important as we continue to interact with students, provide programming for students, and think about how that looks in the classroom. And so is there anything else any of the panelists would like to add about kind of what they would like to say about well-being and like any other further definitions about well-being? What I'd like to do is maybe shift gears and Asavari, you were going in that direction, is all of our panelists today have different resources that they're bringing to the table, experiences with programming and ways of interacting with students both inside and outside the classroom. And so I'd like to shift the conversation to a little bit about resources and what are the resources that you provide to the U of M community around well-being and care. And one of the things in structuring this conversation is we wanted to look at, we have students or panelists who are doing direct work with students and those who are also supporting faculty and instructors in the process of thinking about well-being and how do we integrate that into the classroom. And so we wanted to provide a breadth of resources. And so maybe we can start with, since Asavari, you were kind of going in that direction, and maybe you and Kelly can share a little bit about the work that the Bakken Center and the Center for Spirituality and Healing does in the work of well-being, both from the faculty instructor perspective, but then also thinking about the topics and courses you provide for students.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. Thank you so much for, checking out about that. I would really love to talk about the course, which is Ayurvedic healing or Ayurvedic medicine. It's really like trying to understand who you are and what is your makeup, or it is more called as like what is your nature, or it is more like personalized understanding, and we call it as constitution or body type. So once you know about your body type, you can design what kind of diet, lifestyle, and different modalities or different exercises will be suitable for you. So there is nothing that is, common, or you cannot look at the food or different lifestyle that is common to everybody. You have to really figure out who you are. And there are different questionnaires. So I use different questionnaires in the class so that the students can go through the questionnaire. They find out about their body type. And then based off of their body type, they design their own diet. So what foods are good for them, how to cook, or what kind of recipes are really good for them on a day-to-day basis. What kind of lifestyle is really good for them from morning until they go back to bed. So this is like creating a really good, like whole day routine for them. And also looking at the seasons, how different seasons can impact your health. So find out about your body type, find out about the external environment and the nature, how it can impact your mind and body, and then try to heal from that and create, kind of a wellness, well-structured, personalized approach to the wellness, which is very, individualized kind of wellness guide for you.
And I'll just pick up where Asavari left off there. So at the Bakken Center, we're really thinking about or conceptualizing well-being across 6 different dimensions. What I'm sharing right now in the chat is a link to our Taking Charge of Your Health and Well-Being website. And that's showing a diagram of our model for well-being, thinking about a whole person approach, considering 6 different dimensions of well-being, which is like health, relationships, security, purpose, community, and environment. So, we have this wide umbrella of outreach, and our academic courses are just, one dimension of that. But I feel like Asavari talking about her course was a great example of how the courses at the Bakken Center focus on integrative health and healing and well-being. And I feel like that example of Ayurvedic medicine is, exposing students to different ways of knowing, helping them to connect to their personal experiences, and giving people the tools and resources to define their own well-being, and like what is going to be the steps that personally advance well-being within their own individual and community context. I think that's a really consistent thread through all of the resources and courses that we offer. Specifically, how does our model for well-being translate to our academic courses? We also have a specific, kind of offshoot of the model for well-being, specifically for thinking about supporting student well-being in the context of the classroom, and that's called our Wellbeing Enhances Learning, or WELL model. And I just want to throw a link to that in the chat as well. Trying to keep all of these as convenient Z links as much as possible. So again, that's just demonstrating goals and examples and strategies of teaching and learning practices that support student well-being, just through reducing barriers and enhancing accessibility, and also just increasing transparency in the academic environment. And that model itself was originally developed by Bakken Center instructors, back in like 2013 and 2014, and it's just continued to grow and evolve organically over time. Most recent updates were in 2020 and 2021 to have just a deeper reflection of universal design for learning principles and anti-racist pedagogy as well, just within those practices and strategies that are part of the model. So it's just about, finding the resources, helping people connect to them, and create personal meaning through that. And another thing that I would share was some specifically curated resources that we pulled together that would be helpful for this audience. And I'm sharing that link in the chat now as well. So I think that's just a really broad overview of how we are operationalizing that support of well-being, and thinking about the reciprocal relationship between not only personal well-being as your personal identity, but then also in your academic identity as a student or an instructor, a staff member, or both, and how it all flows together. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Kelly. I can say from an instructor perspective, we did use, my colleague and I used the Taking, I think it was the first resource you shared, Kelly, the Taking Charge one, and had our students do that as an exercise, and then do a pair and share with another student. And so I think one of the things I appreciated about that tool is it was easy to insert as a quick activity in the classroom, but then also gave the students some new language around well-being and ways that they could think about taking care of themselves. So thank you for sharing that resources. Carly and Jessica, from a PES perspective, and you're doing more direct work with students, both kind of incoming first years all the way through seniors in terms of like mentorship and leadership. What are some resources that you have found helpful in working with first gen students around well-being?
So I can start us off. So when I think about resources specifically, PES is very connected to other offices and liaisons like Nina and other beyond to connect our students with. So we invest a lot of time and energy in making sure that our peer mentors and our pro staff feel connected and supported, and understanding how to navigate different situations that may come up with our students. Something that stands out to me about the PES team is that we also lead by example. So not only are we focused on our students' well-being and cultivating that, it's one thing to invite a student to be open and honest and hold space and self-care. You can name that, but if you're not practicing that, it almost does more damage than, you might as well not invite them if you're not leading by example. And so I think as staff, we are continually having those conversations. If we're sick, right? If you're not feeling well. And that's a very relevant example for me personally. When I was working with a student, I was like trying to attend this meeting and realize, no, that's not leading by the example. I don't want the student to feel like I need them to show up if they're sick. And so I think that's a big part of what our team does well. And then the second piece is, I alluded to it, but we invest a lot in training. And so just to tell you a little bit more about the mental health first aid program, we want our students to understand that supporting our students holistically means normalizing mental health crises in a student's life. And so really naming and humanizing mental health language, self-care language, and taking up spaces and that. So I think in the way we invest in our student staff to support our students and showing up as we want our students to show up.
Yeah, excuse me, and I can add a little bit. I think, echoing what Jessica said, as a graduate student, and for many of the students in President's Emerging Scholars, we have a outstandingly high achieving group of students, right? And we foster this kind of high expectation, excellency, et cetera, but in all the ways that we model our self-care continues to foster them in terms of longevity. So last panel, we started a conversation around career services and kind of these foundations of how we're approaching career. This feels similar. And so as a graduate student, as a young professional, as a person who worked full-time in undergrad, right, and was like simultaneously trying to learn what balance even is, does it exist? All the people, I see many familiar faces in the Zoom today, like fostered my awareness as well as modeled what that really meant for me. And so going through training as a peer mentor, as well as going through coaching and now as a professional staff, and also my own career development, right? Like the investment in what does that really mean system-wide, right? Like what are the unlearnings that we have to do as young professionals, in different stages of our career with the same or different leadership? What are the expectations and negotiations with supervisors and mentors, right? Like all of those really what feel like difficult conversations, but adjusting the bar for the generations that we're attempting to foster, right? That all feels important.
Thank you all very much. And I think Nina is going to be able to build on some of that in terms of the student aspects, student-facing interactions that we have with students. And so Nina, go ahead and share a little bit about the work that you and your team are doing with students around well-being and particularly think about first-gen students.
Yeah, thanks, Consuelo. Yeah, I think, so I work at Student Counseling Services, and I've been here for about 5.5 years now. And when I was first starting, many of the services were really kind of like the classic, what you would think of around mental health services. So individual counseling, group counseling, and it's been really cool to see across the years, like a really growth and development of more like outreach and community-based mental health supports. And so I think I'll kind of speak to them both a little bit separately about some of the ways that we've been intentionally providing resources and services for first-gen students. As far as like the individual counseling goes, kind of that's like one of the things people frequently think about, of like, okay, like I think about one-on-one therapy, and that's something that we definitely have and is free for students to access. We also don't bill insurance, which can be a really helpful piece if students are on their parents' insurance and maybe their parents don't feel comfortable with them going to counseling, or they don't want to talk about that with their parents. They're still able to come and get support from us. One of the challenges that we noticed is that often our really well-resourced, very privileged students, students who maybe have a legacy of going to universities, had a lot more awareness of us earlier on in the semester. We used to do kind of like a first come, first serve. When we were filled type of model. And then the last year, our diversity equity committee has really worked to shift some of those policies so that we're actually really focusing primarily on access. If we can refer students who have really good insurance and are able to do that, refer them to community mental health, so that we're able to have space to support students who might be holding more marginalized identities, have more acute mental health concerns, who really want an ethnic pair match with one of our counselors, or an identity-based match. So that's been really cool work to see. So we're able to get in more students, especially like more first-gen students. And then as far as resources kind of on the beyond the individual counseling, it's been really important to see how we are like diversifying like the ways that we think about mental health and well-being. So it doesn't only have to be one-on-one therapy, but there's like a range of other ways that mental health support can exist for our students. And so one of the programs that has been really commonly used with our first gen students is the Let's Talk program. It was originally created by Cornell, and it is a program where you're able to go and do drop-in one-time consultation with a Let's Talk counselor. We have a range of different folks who are around campus. We have different locations as well as virtual options. And students, if they have a specific problem or concern, or they're like curious about counseling, but they're not quite sure, are able to go and get support. So oftentimes that is an easier kind of like quote unquote sell to students who might be hesitant to go to counseling. One thing I always like to name too is that one of the most common reasons people don't come is that they feel like their problems are not bad enough, or they feel like their mental health is not bad enough. There's some of that like internalized ableism that pops up. And so really like affirming for students, like actually mental health is just because many people are struggling doesn't mean that you're not struggling. And so being able to support students and going and having an experience of receiving support can be really helpful. And then we also have a number of different affinity groups, workshops. For the first time this year, one of our counselors and then our graduate assistant, Jajan Tu and Sei Chang, are starting an affinity group for first gen students. So that's been really lovely to see that specific support. And then we also have other affinity groups around racial, ethnic, cultural identities. And that's been a really lovely place for folks to kind of come together in community. And those are done in partnership with a lot of our campus partners, really recognizing a lot of times students might not make their way through our door, but they're already connected with PES, MK, Center for Spirituality, other partners. And so it's been lovely to see that support too.
Thank you all. And Kelly just reshared the slides in our chat. So please definitely all of the resources and more that you've heard today from our panelists are listed on those slides. Now we'd like to open up the last few minutes we have for any questions that we have from our panelists. And you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can type your question in the chat. I can share from the last session, someone had a question around navigating like higher ed and the spaces in which we are in higher ed, not just the metaphorical spaces, but the actual physical spaces that we have constructed. And how do we navigate those spaces that may create senses of uneasiness and may be kind of counterintuitive to some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of well-being, and how do we overcome that and create spaces that promote well-being, that promote inclusiveness and engagement for our students. And yeah, so any of our panelists, if you want to share kind of what you shared in the last space to the kind of that question, and if I guess I would open it up to other folks if you have any ideas around that as well.
So I had shared that the PES program had the opportunity to host the Merge Summer STEM program this past summer, and we were able to partner with Michael Winkoff, who's the director for the Science Communication Lab on campus. And he introduced to us an opportunity for students to go into different spaces on campus to reflect on what feelings were coming forward for them in those spaces. And so the previous session, she was asking like tactics or reasons to advocate for spaces for individual people or target groups or underrepresented students. And so I was giving her the example of students naming how they're feeling in spaces on campus, and that maybe being a support and strengthening her argument. I also just shared that have that feeling with the space in Kaufman, where the space pictures on the wall, specifically when you're going downstairs, like going over to like the area, is like all old white people. And it's just like a microaggression to me, where I'm constantly reminded of my ancestors' access and exclusion from the space. And so I was offering those things in support of her attempting to have a space for her students, specifically in Carlson. Yeah, so I think that spaces for students underrepresented directly supports them. Oh, and another thing I brought up was emerge students. We were having reoccurring meetings in specific place on purpose to build community and familiarity with those, so that they're able to go there, and when we're not literally on campus, that they can still feel that comfort in the space that's for them.
Any last comments before I turn it over to my wonderful co-host Kelly to bring it home?
Just one thing I feel will be incredibly useful for new students, for the first generation students, if we can provide them a handbook or something that has all these resources listed in it. So as soon as they arrive, if they get this, there will be less kind of anxiety build up about what to look forward to and where to go and find this help. So this can be, very, very useful for everybody.
This is Kelly. Thank you so much, Asavari. Wonderful idea as a resource. And also want to note in the chat from Carly, and with the tags on A+, that would be super powerful. And I love this idea. And these are exactly why we make spaces like these, where we can bring forward such wonderful ideas for resources and actions that we can take. So we want to thank you all so much, especially a heartfelt gratitude to our panelists for taking the time to do these sessions today, and to all of you all who attended. Thank you so much. I know we truly appreciate it. We will now, this kind of ends, I think, the breakout session portion. I added the link to our program if you want to go to our closing for the Institute. That should be the next thing on the agenda. Thank you again so much for being here, everybody, and we wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.